right. All right. Thank you, everybody, for checking in. That's really great. I'm glad to see all your faces. I want to just go over a little bit of our community guidelines while we're here. We're going to have a little bit of housekeeping first off. If you're not familiar with the place, we've got some tea in the back here, and there will be some coffee and snacks in a little while. It's here, which is fabulous. So feel free to take care of your needs. If you need to get up, that's totally cool. This isn't like a weird classroom where you have to be like teacher. And then our restrooms are just going to be straight out these doors to your left as you pass the couple of studios. You'll see restrooms written up above. And we also have more accessible bathrooms in the back, which any staff member can take you to if you need to use those. And so part of our community guidelines are going to be that one voice at a time is really, really helpful when we're having these discussions. A general respect of folks that are here. Everyone's here for the reason that they love Open Signal and want it to thrive, I'm guessing. So that if we can keep that in mind, that would be really great. And we're going to have a presenter for about 30 minutes. And during that presentation, if you have questions that come up, that's great. And actually, we want to encourage you to grab a sticky note and write down your questions if they're coming up while the presenter is presenting. And then afterwards, there will be a period of 30 minutes for questions and answers. And if we need to bleed into our networking and our exercise after, we can. And there will be a 10-minute break after the Q&A session. There's an agenda right here in case you forget what I'm saying. But during that Q&A portion, I'll take a stack of who's in line, and I'll be writing down everyone's name so that we can make sure that everyone gets a chance to ask their question. And we do have a mic, so if you can hold your question until the mic is in front of you so that we can get that audio, that'd be awesome. Does anyone have any questions about that stuff? Does everyone agree to those guidelines? Yeah? All right. Cool. Well, Jim. Jim. Okay, great. If you didn't, then we'd have a discussion about how we could come to a consensus. All right, so that's great. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Julio, our presenter. Thank you so much for being here, even though you're also feeling a little under the weather too. Just a bit.
Just my throat.
Just your throat. So not contagious, it's fine. Thank you for being here, and take it away.
Well, thanks for having me here. Today, I'm Julio Malchuk, and I work for the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission, and also, is this on? I'm sorry, my voice is pretty quiet right now, which is an oddity to me, but I see signaling that a couple people can't hear very well in the studio. So, okay, all right. Do you want me to wait, or I can try to speak up a little bit? It's just not working very well. So, I can try this. Is this one better? Okay, I'll just do that. Thanks for that suggestion. So I'm Julio Malchuk, and I work with the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission and also in the Portland Office for Community Technology. I was asked here today to talk a little bit about the MHCRC, which stands for the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission, and our office's relationship with Open Signal and what we do on behalf of the residents of Portland for in that role. First of all, I'd like to just share a little bit of my background in community media. I've been involved with communications policy, social action media for pretty much my whole professional career. I started being interested in media when I was in journalism school at the University of Montana many years ago, and in the early 80s. And the interest was in access to media was kind of spurned through my work in a social justice organization in Missoula. And then we were the kind of sowed the seeds for Missoula Community Access Television that got going after I left to move to DC, but we were, we did the early work around that. So when I did move to DC, I worked at the Alliance for Community Media until about 1987. Some of you might be familiar with the Alliance for Community Media, but they're a national organization that advocates on behalf of media centers like Open Signal. I then moved to Portland, and for the last 32 years, I've worked in government public policy, mostly focused on gaining benefits for access to media and technology through the cable franchising authority and processes. I've also served on the regional and national boards for the Alliance for Community Media, and I'm a member of Open Signal. So, the MHCRC was created through an intergovernmental agreement among the jurisdictions within Multnomah County. So the members of the MHCRC are the cities of Portland, Troutdale, Wood Village, Fairview, and Gresham, and Multnomah County. The commission is an independent organization chartered under the state. And has its own kind of authority around regulating the cable franchises and being able to do contracts and those kinds of things. The MHCRC does contract with the city of Portland for staffing services. So that's why I work officially within the City of Portland Office for Community Technology. I know the relationship sometimes can be a little hard to understand, so if anybody has any detailed questions about that, I'd be happy to answer those later. The MHCRC does have the authority to negotiate cable franchises throughout the county, and also to implement and manage the public resources derived under those franchises. Those kinds of things entail, as they relate to Open Signal, are the community media channels, the program listings, those kinds of things that relate to more what the cable company is to provide the community around community media. And then also we oversee and disperse the funds collected from the companies for the capital costs for community media, our community technology grants, and the institutional network. Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. And so if you have any informational questions like that or clarifications, just speak up. That's great. So a franchise agreement is essentially a negotiated agreement between, in our case, a communications company and the public body to use the public right-of-way to offer their for-profit services. So public rights-of-way in this case are pretty much, wherever if you look in your neighborhood, wherever the poles are that provide power, cable television lines, those kinds of things. All of that infrastructure is in the public right-of-way, and then there's underground public right-of-way. So all the streets and the easements next to the street are considered public right-of-way. And the easement actually into your home, all properties have or a resident, all properties have a utility and communications easement so that you can be the property can be served. So is that helpful? And the franchises include, as negotiated agreements, certain benefits, public benefits that I mentioned earlier as a requirement of the agreement. At least that's but they are negotiated. So each franchise and each community looks a little different. Okay, all right. So the Office for Community Technology at the City of Portland is a bureau, even though we're a very small office. The office is in Mayor Wheeler's portfolio, so we report to the mayor. The office's work is about 1/3 dedicated to supporting the MHCRC and its role and mission, And then the other 2/3 is is working around negotiating and overseeing all communications and utilities companies' use of the public right-of-way in the city of Portland. So that piece is very City of Portland centric, and it is we bring in the third largest revenue to the city's general fund through those agreements for use of the public right-of-way. So those include not the cable television franchises that the MHCRC oversees, but it includes all of the companies that use the telecommunications, the phone companies. It includes the water utilities and gas utilities, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of different companies that use the public right-of-way, and our office, at least in the city of Portland, negotiates those agreements and collects the revenue from those. We also champion communications policy at the city of Portland, such as the Portland Broadband Strategic Plan and the Digital Equity Action Plan, and I'll talk a little bit about those things later. The office has always been focused on supporting, at least as long as I've been there, and it's been quite a while, but focused on supporting equitable access to media through the MHCRC. But, the importance of accessing the internet and having being included in kind of the digital age has obviously grown exponentially. At least in the last 10 years or so. And so our office has really focused and expanded its work around what we call digital inclusion. And so that's, just the importance of addressing barriers for underserved populations to be able to adopt internet technology so that they can participate and gain the benefits and the opportunities in our digital age society. Primarily, the focus of that work is around those who have traditionally been disconnected, and all of the data that we have, and nationally, that those are primarily people of color, people living with disabilities, and seniors. So that's kind of where our work has focused in that area. Excuse me. I'll try not to do that into the mic. And what we've really learned over the years is that if the work in both, when you're designing something or when you're implementing or distributing resources, if it's focused on addressing barriers that those populations face, then it'll address inclusion for everybody. So that's kind of been our transition towards focusing on those populations to be included. So the MHCRC has a relationship with OpenSignal, and so does the Portland Office for Community Technology, and they're definitely interrelated, but there are also some distinctions. So I just wanted to outline that quickly because it does have to do, excuse me, it does have to do with the funding, and I know everyone's always interested in money, so I thought I would explain that a little bit. So the City of Portland does have a grant agreement, a contract with OpenSignal. They contribute part of their general fund money to fund certain services and requirements under that grant agreement. And it mostly goes to operational costs for the organization. So those are things like mostly the people to provide training, people to do outreach, people to organize these kinds of events, those kinds of things. And excuse me, the MHCRC collects money from the cable company specifically to fund capital costs for OpenSignal and for Metro East in Gresham. And so those funds go more to, the studio and the equipment and some of the computers and all of those kinds of the mobile equipment, whatever you kind of tangible type of things. And then also some of the costs go to the people who maintain and purchase and test that kind of equipment. So those are kind of the two agreements that OpenSignal has, one with the City of Portland, and then the other one is with the MHCRC for the capital funding. I understand that there are some copies of the grant agreement available to people if you're interested. I didn't bring them, but someone said that they might be available. And I don't, I'm not going to go over the specifics of the grant agreement here. But what I did want to do was kind of give you an overview and emphasize a couple things that maybe have changed. I don't know how long some of the participants here have been involved with OpenSignal, but over the years there have been some changes. Like I said, we started out 30 years ago or so when I was involved being more around access to the media. It was a time when media consolidation was really ramping down kind of community access, which has kind of continued. And so it was, having a local voice in news and information media. But since over time and with the changes in our environment around the advent of the kind of internet technologies, it has become more evident that it's important for everybody to have access to internet type technologies for those same purposes, to have a voice and to be able to receive and participate in our society. So the grant agreement with the City of Portland, and that's what I'm going to focus on mostly, because the grant agreement with the MHCRC is really around the support tools and technology. But with the City of Portland, the services, it includes services and then reporting requirements. And the services are around, content production and video distribution. So that's one area, and that includes not only community programming, supporting training and content development around that, but it also includes some services provided to the City of Portland for government, what we call government programming. Excuse me. Okay. And having said that, the purpose of OpenSignal and the City of Portland's contract for that government programming isn't necessarily to be a propaganda arm of the city government, but it's really to provide citizens with a window on the government, like on the decision-making processes and what's going on. So the primary funded areas for that is cable casting and producing live, and also then, played back later, but is the city council meetings, the budget forums, those kinds of things. And also there's some other government agencies that contract with OpenSignal to do their, to put their meetings out for people to know what's going on. But the other area of services are around digital inclusion and digital literacy. We view that as both people knowing how to use video technology for whatever purpose they want to use it for, but also how to use the internet for whatever purpose they want to use it for. So when I talk about digital literacy, it's including both kind of internet-based technology and multimedia technology. In some areas they make that distinction, but for us it's pretty blended from that purpose. So one of the things about, I think it was 10 years ago or so, we've gone through a couple of contracts with OpenSignal over my time. So what we really started to look at was focusing at least the city's money on those populations that have traditionally been disconnected from these resources. And so, as I said, under some of the services that we've identified now is, for instance, to provide culturally responsive, relevant, and affordable digital literacy and media training for people of color, English language learners, and people with disabilities and seniors to use media and broadband technologies competently. And we do, in our contract, require OpenSignal to tailor the trainings to address barriers that traditionally these folks, the communities, face in getting online or producing media content. It's also to provide services to low-income residents and nonprofit organizations to access the media and broadband content tools, and support for the content sharing across multiple platforms. And I just wanted to emphasize that because I know that I understand when organizations talk about focusing on those certain areas, sometimes it can feel like they're taking maybe resources away from other areas of emphasis. And in my, experience over the time that I've been involved with community media and social action around access to media and technology, is that if we bring everybody into the fold and really help support those people that face these kind of barriers, that everybody will then have access and everybody will be lifted up. So that's my philosophy, and I think that has also been something that's been more adopted by the City of Portland through their equity policies, and also by the MHCRC and the policymakers over time. So I just wanted to emphasize that, and I got to go back to my notes to see what else I was going to touch on before wrapping up and taking your questions. So the last thing I wanted to just touch base on is what's going on at the federal communications level. So in the federal government around, kind of threats to what we do here locally. So the way that the kind of legal construct, and I'm not going to go too much into it, but is that the legal construct for what we do here is under cable franchising is a relationship between the federal government and federal laws and then our local franchises. And so what's going on at the Federal Communications Commission directly affects the rules that we have to operate in locally for our cable franchises. Recently, the FCC has passed an order, adopted an order or a rule that has potentially changed the way that we've understood the funding and the ways that we can allocate funding here locally, the ways we've understood that for like 35 years. So the FCC made a decision on a rule that will restrict what we can spend the money on that we get from the cable companies to really narrow capital costs. And it also potentially down the road will also restrict the ability of the communities to have community media channels and those kinds of things. So I know OpenSignal is doing some advocacy work right now around getting people, to speak up on what your needs are locally and what you want your the congressional leadership at the federal level from Oregon to support. And I think there is a bill that is being sponsored by Senator Markey from Massachusetts, and there's a move right now to get other sponsors in both the House and the Senate that will kind of overturn that FCC rule. So anyway, whatever you hear from OpenSignal about those things, I would just encourage you to get involved and to ensure that we can continue to provide these resources to the community. So I think I covered everything that was requested of me. I hope everyone could hear me okay. I'm trying to keep this mic as close as I can to my mouth. And I'm open for questions. Is that what's next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone have any questions?
I don't know. Is this working now?
Oh, fabulous.
Oh, we have two. Great. What do you need? Sorry. I was going to say, are there stickies somewhere?
For you.
No. For people.
I don't think this is on, but I just wondered what the name of the bill is or the bill number that we just mentioned.
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't have that here with me, but I just noticed Rebecca get on her phone, so I'm thinking she might be looking up.
I don't even think it's been introduced yet.
I think it might have a title though or something. The rule that passed is referred to the in-kind mixed network use rule at the FCC. So if you hear that, that's the rule that is undercutting local benefits.
It has a docket number. So if you were to go
Okay.
to the FCC website or just should I check? So if you were to Google or go to the FCC website and search, I think in quotation marks just to make it as a single phrase, but it would be docket 05-311. That's pretty much what we've been referring to it as for the past year and a half or so since it was introduced. It doesn't, I think it has an official name, but it tends to shift a little bit. The FCC's page on this measure has existed since 2005 or so it's been updated. Yeah, but the one consistent reference to it has been docket 05311. Yep.
It doesn't say much, but that's the one that's being introduced.
Okay, it looks as if right now the bill that they're referring to it is Protect Community Television Act.
Yeah, that's brand new.
So
Later this
yeah. And I do have to say that the MHCRC and the City of Portland have both funded and joined in a local government lawsuit on opposing the FCC order. And the emphasis right now is to get the congressional delegations to step up and say, what the FCC does not line up with what we anticipated would be done under the Cable Act, and we're going to clarify it. So that's kind of the way the FCC interprets laws and then establishes rules around those laws in certain areas. So the effort right now, the advocacy effort, is really to get your congressional delegation to support the bill, because the FCC rule is in court right now, unless you have a lot of money to contribute to a court case.
Check. Test. Check.
About Comcast and the other, we have 3 cable companies, so it's Comcast, CenturyLink, and Frontier, have not notified us yet what their intentions are under the FCC rule. Are there any other questions for me? I'm not planning on staying for the full next hour and a half or whatever it is. So if you want to ask questions, this is a good time to do it.
Well, I do have a call along the bottom. If I can get a hold of the tape, give it to me. I will do it.
All right.
So sorry, Emily, there's a stack. Is that all right? Yeah, like people in. So I'm doing a stack, so if you raise your
I'm
hand,
sorry.
I point at
It's
you,
probably
and then
my
I'm
fault.
keeping track of who's next. So Emily, you're next.
Hi, so you mentioned that there will be, according to this rule, this FCC rule, that there will be restrictions on how the money can be spent here, and I think I got something about restrictions on the public access channels. So could you go into any more detail on those things, what we stand to lose here?
Well, yes. I have to think of how to frame this up. So, under the Cable Act, there's two fees that the companies pay for use of the right of way locally. One is called the franchise fee, and the franchise fee is specifically goes to local governments for use of the public right of way, and the local governments consider that like general fund revenue. So that money goes to fund things like, parks and police and whatever the local governments fund out of their general fund. And then the second fee that we've negotiated here locally is technically referred to as the PEG INET fee, but the companies pay that to the commission, and the commission then disperses that money for the capital costs, again, like I said before, in the past, for our community technology grants, use of the institutional network, and then for Open Signal and Metro East capital costs to run these facilities, or for these facilities and equipment. And what the FCC did is that they interpreted the current federal law to say that to have a very narrow definition of what constitutes a capital cost, incredibly narrow, and that anything that outside of what their narrow definition, the companies could offset that cost if they're required, like to continue to pay a fee or to supply a media channel or those kind of things that they do in, that's where the in-kind comes from, that they could offset the payment of the franchise fee in an amount that the company values that, say, channel, or the putting the programming in their programming guide, or the video on demand capacity that Open Signal and Metro East have. And so what they've done is they have set up a situation where if a local government wants to retain the benefits under the negotiated franchise, they're going to lose money to their general fund that goes to fund, basic services like fire and police. And so up until now, and for the last at least 35 years, the interpretation has been that the capital cost included all of these other things and didn't apply, and that the in-kind services negotiated with the company were all separate than the franchise fee. And now the FCC has said, oh no, well, these don't apply. So I know it's a little complex and hard to explain, but that's the situation the FCC has set up. So it's, it's going to reduce benefits. So that's where we go with that. Currently, the FCC hasn't made a definitive rule about whether the community media channel capacity would be an offset, would be eligible for offset, because they were struggling with how they would be valued, the channels would be valued. And so they kind of set what they call setting it aside, but the FCC would not have to go through another rulemaking. And as I don't recall your name, but as you were referring to, the rulemakings take a long time. So this was initially initiated in 2005, you said, or something around there. But in this case, the FCC can just issue, because they've already gone through the rulemaking, they could issue a clarification, and it could include, the value of the access channels. So we anticipate that happening.
How long is the grant agreement? Like how many years or year?
The current grant agreement, both with the MHCRC for the capital funds and for this with the City of Portland for the operations funding, goes through. We're on a fiscal year, so our fiscal year is June through July, and it goes through July of 2022. Or sorry, June of 2022.
Okay. And then it sounds like they're trying to get this Protect Community Media or whatever act thing to happen in 2021. So there's a chance that we might be able to sort of circumvent this, maybe, like, losing some of these funds.
Well, hopefully. I mean, that's the intent with the act is to for Congress to essentially say, no, this is what the law means, or that this is what we're going to clarify so that the FCC doesn't have a misunderstanding about what the intent of Congress is with a law. And in the meantime, there's a lawsuit making its way through the courts. I think it's in the Sixth Circuit right now, on challenging the FCC rule. But we did try to get the FCC to issue a stay, because that's part of the process, is you can ask the FCC to issue a stay on a rule until the courts figure it out. And the FCC, not surprisingly, denied the request for a stay. But that's still in the courts, so the court may issue a stay on the rule at some point or not. It just, the courts, you never quite know when and how things are going to move. So did that answer your question? Kinda?
Yeah. Just for the record, as far, because I'm part of the ACM conversations, is that really the most important thing is legislators. Those are the people that we really need to, our personal messages aren't as effective as our local legislators and stuff like that. Just for the record.
At the city level?
No, I mean at the state level.
Representative?
Yeah. So you contacting them is the main thing.
Are there any other questions?
I guess I'm just wanting to know if is there any specific amount of money that would be short, or a percentage, or anything that we can look at, like writing on the wall that would.
That's. I'm sorry. Were you finished with your question?
Yeah, that's basically it. Thanks.
All right. That's the big question mark, because it's as was asked earlier. Have we heard from any of the cable companies about how they intend to implement this? It's because this is new, and we don't know how the cable companies might try to value certain things that right now have been provided as a requirement of the franchise agreement. We just don't know. And we also don't know what they might bring, what the companies might say are in the rule or not in the rule. And so that's why we're waiting to hear from the companies. And at that point, there still will be, I'm sure, negotiations and some decision making around how this all moves forward. I do have to say that the companies, at least Comcast has publicly at two of the MHCRC meetings, said that they won't, that they will not move forward with implementation of the rule without first having a discussion with the MHCRC, the Portland office, and the elected officials. So they've made that commitment, at least, to say. I think we haven't had reports yet from other local governments that companies have started to just reduce franchise fees without anybody knowing why, or why they're doing the offset. A couple of jurisdictions have received questions that kind of indicates where some of the companies might be looking at. But because our franchises are negotiated locally, it really, they are going to have to go through, they might have a corporate policy, but they're going to have to go through every franchise and see what's included in, the local franchise, and then make decisions around that, and then let us know what their intent is. So, but as soon as we have that information, I know Justin and Rebecca are following it with us, and we're in close contact. So we would be able to get more information out once we have some clarity about the company's intent, and that I can't even say what the actions of the commission or the the local jurisdictions might be at that point. So.
So if I'm understanding right, the cable companies will be limited in what they can support through the money to us. Did I also understand that they can also choose to give us funding through another way if they want to support those activities that are being eliminated?
Well,
is that up to the cable company to determine that?
Yes, I mean the companies at any point could could choose to support community media in a variety of ways. So that's always on the table,
Okay.
so to speak. But that would be, that's different than what we do, and that is, that we negotiate the requirements. Right. And so, so that's it. The FCC rule, it puts in place the mechanism for the companies to decide that, potentially decide that the benefits that they're providing community media and the community, like the channels, it does put in place a mechanism where they could offset, say, well, our channel's valued at, pulling something out of the air, whatever amount, and therefore we're going to reduce the franchise fee by that amount if you want to continue to have the channel. So it's not really, it clarifies from a rulemaking perspective, but the company could choose not to do that. I mean, that's the whole, thing. But what it does is it doesn't allow us like we do now. It's not a requirement of the company. Yeah. So it changes that landscape for us. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't seen just where the funding's going to go yet, so I just looked at here.
Yeah. Well, what can continue to be funded with the capital funds is we do not, capital assets can continue to be funded with our PEG INET fee. But what can't be funded, and it was a biggie, it's, I don't know, but is the actual what we call the institutional network. And that's the network that provides connectivity, the broadband, the network connectivity for all the schools, all the libraries, local government sites. It's 300 sites throughout the county. And the FCC said no use of the INET or no INET itself can be funded. It is not a PEG capital cost. And that was huge for our area. Some areas don't have INETs, but because we've really worked closely with our public agencies, schools and libraries and such to provide that as a benefit under our franchise, that's a big blow for our area. So.
Not about us, but I'm curious, how are they responding?
They're kind of in a waiting pattern also. We have put some information out to them as well to, express their views on what the impact could be. But yeah.
I have a comment about the value of the channels. I don't know about Comcast, but I know that on CenturyLink, the community access channels are relegated to literally a backwater. You cannot flip through the channels and happen upon the PCM channels. If you flip across the channels, you come to this card that says public access, and you have to go to that channel in order to have a selection of community access channels available to you. So if they try to say that they try to value it the same as the rest of the channels, I would say it's not on an even basis.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Is that everything? Oh.
I have two questions. One is, I assume, since this is a federal ruling, that other states are being impacted too, so I'm just curious if you are aware of how other states and communities are handling this, if they're doing similar type of discussions and advocacy, and also who is benefiting from these changes. I don't what caused this change to take place, and who's going to benefit?
Yes, other communities are doing kind of the same things that we've talked about here today. And the Alliance for Community Media, I think Emily said that she's involved with the advocacy, the being in touch anyway with what's going on. So this is a national effort because it does affect in all communities that have any kind of community media, and that includes government access, education access, community access, INETs, everything. So it is a national, and other communities are doing the same thing. They're getting their residents to have their voice heard and to talk about the importance of the resources that have been provided over the years for these purposes. I'm sorry, remind me of your second question. Oh, who benefits? Well, really, who benefits are the companies, the cable companies, because, they at a corporate level, I will say, companies have always tried to rid themselves of regulations or rules that they feel, undercut their bottom line. That's just the way a lot of businesses operate. And in this case, that's kind of where where the lobbying and the pressure has come, is through the cable companies' corporate entities and their, DC lobbyists saying that that these are benefits that they provide, and that those benefits cost them money to provide. And so if they're able to rid themselves of those requirements, they'll no longer have to provide those, and therefore won't have to put any company resources into those kinds of things. So, that's pretty simple. It's the companies that will benefit on this rule. Yeah.
Thank you for that last statement, because despite the calmness in the room, I'm thinking this is a looming disaster. And in the current climate, federal political climate, I think they'll be really happy to get rid of you and OpenSignal and all the people that are served by OpenSignal. Save a little bit more money for the hugely profitable big companies, and don't hear from you. They don't want to hear from you.
So one thing that I forgot to mention earlier is that while we were raising awareness of this campaign of the FCC's implementation of this rule, I actually created a short URL for people to type in because the FCC purposely makes it extremely difficult for you to find the specific page which refers to this ruling. And as you can imagine, they make it very difficult for you to file a complaint/comment in any event. I created a short URL in September 2018. The URL is bit.ly/savecommunitymedia. And as it so happened, that URL was shared hundreds upon hundreds of times because I was able to track the usage of that address and where people were accessing it from. And to the surprise of absolutely nobody, it was the most popular short link that I've ever created during my position here at OpenSignal. But yeah, the link is bit.ly, bit.ly/savecommunitymedia. And it still works. I mean, I don't know why it wouldn't work, but it still works. I just clicked on it here. So if you would like to file a comment or look into any of the new developments that have happened since the rule was implemented on November 3rd, 2005, you can go to that address. Thank you.
I wanted to say before you guys all left, obviously OpenSignal's pretty aware of this situation, and that is why we're having all these meetings with y'all. So we have the next several Saturdays, we're going to have like feedback sessions, and we're going to talk about all the things that we are planning for and we want your feedback on. So this isn't like, you know, I think that there's a lot of doom and gloom feels right now, but we're like working actively to try and find solutions, and we're in a much better place than you can imagine. So, but we need your help talking about it. So I encourage you guys to come to our sessions in the next following Saturdays. Same time, same place. Okay.
Thanks. I'm wondering if you can put that information on the producer forum, or if we can get some of that, more of that on the website, so it's easier to access for people who can't make it to these.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we can do that.
It's my understanding that historically the cable access was given the right to be in Portland if they allowed facilities such as the former Portland Community Media, OpenSignal, and on their channels. How can they renege on their promises from the start?
So if I'm understanding your question, it's around the authority Yeah. Okay. So over time, the federal laws have changed, and as I stated earlier, the construct is, there are federal laws that govern cable franchising, and then we at the local level have within those laws, then we have the authority to negotiate franchise agreements that accord with the laws and also have our local public benefits included as well. And so, but those local public benefits have to also accord with the laws. I mean, it's kind of that symbiotic type relationship. So over time, the laws have changed, and then also the FCC is charged with interpreting those laws, and so that's how they go through. That's these rulemaking processes, and then there's an interpretation or a rule established. And this most recent one, the rulemaking process took from 2005 till now, and I think I can't recall the exact date, but the current rule became effective in September of 2019. So that's how that companies, it's not promises, really, it's regulatory authority and rules that they are adhering to. And so that's what's changed over time is the authority at the federal level, the laws at the federal level, the rulemaking at the FCC, and then how we have to interpret and implement those at the local level.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Great. Okay. So in closing, I just wanted to mention a couple of just one quick thing, really, and that is that the one of the things that the MHCRC, in partnership with Multnomah County Library and Multnomah County, are engaged in currently is the Your Voice, Our Communications Technology 2.2, no 2.0, 2020. I'll say 2020. And what that is it's a countywide study on kind of the current state and current uses of communications technology, kind of where we're at now, and the future vision of communications technology. The study results will inform public policy makers on what kinds of things, what kind of barriers people are facing, what's the community's vision, what's important to the community around communications technology. So I would just encourage you that when you see Open Signal or any of the other organizations, local governments that you're engaged with, talking about the Your Voice and asking you to take a survey. If you have online connectivity, it'll be available online. It's launching this next week. So I would just really encourage you to take the survey and also to ask anybody that you know and send it out to all your networks to get as many voices heard as we can. That's one piece of our study. We also we concluded a scientific survey in late 2019, and then there's some focus groups and those kinds of things, activities, more qualitative data collection going on as well. But for this group, I just wanted to kind of put that out there, put it on your radar, and please engage and participate in that. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And bearing with me.